Sefu and Amari appeared to have the perfect life. They lived in a beautiful home in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in Luthando, surrounded by luxury and comfort. Sefu, a successful businessman, had built his wealth from the ground up, and Amari had been by his side every step of the way. She had supported him during his struggles, believing in his dreams even when times were tough. Their friends admired their love story, seeing them as the ideal couple, successful, elegant, and deeply in love. Amari dedicated herself to making their home warm and welcoming. She handled every detail of their life with care, ensuring Sefu had everything he needed to focus on his business. She prepared his favorite meals, organized their social gatherings, and stood proudly beside him at corporate events. To the outside world, their marriage seemed unshakable, a partnership built on trust and loyalty. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Sefu had started to change, subtle at first, but noticeable. He came home later than usual, often distracted and distant. His once affectionate gestures became rare, and conversations between them grew shorter. Amari, ever trusting and devoted, believed he was simply busy with work. She had no idea that the love and commitment she cherished were slowly slipping away, and a painful storm was about to shake the foundation of their marriage. Sefu's life took a dangerous turn the day he met Zaria. She was young, stunning, and full of confidence, the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Zaria lived a lavish lifestyle, always dressed in designer clothes, attending the most exclusive parties, and surrounding herself with the wealthiest men in Luthando. She had a charm that was hard to resist, and Sefu, despite everything he had with Amari, found himself drawn to her. At first, it was just innocent conversations, a few stolen moments of laughter, but soon it became something more. As the affair deepened, Sefu changed. He no longer rushed home after work, always finding reasons to stay out late. Business meetings ran longer than usual. Unexpected trips out of town became frequent, and when he was home, his mind was elsewhere. The warm, loving husband Amari once knew was slowly slipping away. The little things that once made their marriage special, late-night talks, shared laughter over dinner, even simple goodnight kisses, faded into the background. Amari began to sense something was wrong. The way Sefu avoided eye contact, how he seemed irritated by her questions, the sudden secrecy with his phone, none of it felt right. Her friends noticed too. Some even pulled her aside, gently suggesting that she pay closer attention to Sefu's actions. "Be careful, Amari," one of them warned. "Something isn't adding up." But Amari refused to believe the worst. She had built her life with Sefu, stood by him when he had nothing, and loved him with all her heart. She convinced herself that he was just stressed with work, that he would come back to her when things settled. Trusting him had always come naturally, and she wasn't ready to doubt him now. What she didn't realize was that Sefu had already stepped into a world that would soon shatter everything they had built together. One evening, as Amari prepared dinner, humming softly to herself, Sefu walked into the kitchen with a serious expression. She turned to him with a warm smile, but something in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. Before she could ask what was wrong, he sighed and spoke the words that shattered her world. "I want a divorce, Amari." At first, she thought she had misheard him. Her hands trembled as she placed the spoon down, searching his face for any sign that this was some cruel joke. But there was no hesitation in his voice, no trace of the man who had once held her close and promised her forever. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sefu exhaled deeply, avoiding her gaze. "I just don't love you anymore," he said coldly, as if those years of love and sacrifice meant nothing. "I need to move on." Tears filled Amari's eyes as she took a shaky step forward. "Sefu, please, we can fix this. Whatever is wrong, we can work through it." But Sefu shook his head. His decision had already been made. "It's over, Amari. I've already made arrangements to move out." The words felt like a knife to her chest. How had she not seen this coming? How could the man she had built her life with throw it all away so easily? She tried to reason with him, begged him to reconsider, reminded him of all they had been through. But Sefu was unmoved. His heart was elsewhere, with another woman, though he didn't say it out loud. He was done with their marriage, and nothing Amari said could change that. The next morning, he packed his things and walked out of their home without a second glance. Amari stood by the window, watching as he drove away, tears streaming down her face. The emptiness in the house mirrored the emptiness in her heart. Word spread quickly through their social circles. The whispers followed her everywhere. "Did you hear? Sefu left Amari for a younger woman. How embarrassing, after all she did for him." Amari had never felt more humiliated, more betrayed. The man she had given everything to had abandoned her as if she were nothing. And now she was left alone to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. Sefu wasted no time showing off his new life. Just weeks after leaving Amari, he was seen everywhere with Zaria. They dined at the most expensive restaurants, attended glamorous parties, and vacationed in exotic destinations. Their pictures flooded social media. Sefu smiling, his arm wrapped around Zaria, while she flaunted designer outfits and diamond jewelry. People whispered about how quickly he had moved on, but Sefu didn't care. He was living the life he had always dreamed of, with a woman who made him feel young and powerful. For Amari, the pain was unbearable. She couldn't escape the reminders of her broken marriage. Every time she stepped outside, she felt the stares, heard the hushed gossip. Some people pitied her, others mocked her behind her back. But the worst part was knowing that the man she had once loved was parading another woman around as if she had never existed. As if the heartbreak wasn't enough, Sefu made things even harder. He cut off all financial support, assuming she would come crawling back to him, desperate and helpless. He thought she couldn't survive without him. Without his money, Amari struggled to pay bills and keep up with the lifestyle she had once taken for granted. The house that once felt warm and full of love now felt cold and empty. But in her darkest moments, she found strength in her best friend, Nia. Nia refused to let her sink into despair. Sefu may have taken away your comfort, but he hasn't taken away your strength, she reminded Amari. You are more than a man's wife. You are a woman with her own power. At first, Amari felt too broken to believe those words, but slowly, Nia's encouragement gave her the will to fight. She wiped her tears, held her head high, and made a promise to herself. She would not let this betrayal define her. Sefu thought she was weak, but he was about to see just how strong she could be. At first, Amari didn't know where to begin. For years, she had built her life around Sefu, managing their home and supporting his career. Now she was alone, forced to figure out a future without him. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but she knew she couldn't sit in her sorrow forever. She had to stand up for herself. She dusted off her law degree and applied to several firms, hoping for a fresh start. The process was tough. Many employers questioned her long gap in practice. Some even doubted her abilities, assuming she had lost touch with the profession. But Amari refused to let rejection break her spirit. She kept pushing forward, determined to prove that she was more than just Sefu's ex-wife. Finally, she landed a position at a prestigious law firm. It wasn't easy at first, long hours, difficult clients, and a fast-paced environment, but she embraced the challenge. Every case she handled, every problem she solved, brought back the confidence she had once lost. Wanting to grow even more, Amari enrolled in personal development courses. She attended seminars, read books on success and resilience, and learned how to build a strong mindset. With each passing day, she felt a shift within herself. She was no longer the woman who had been abandoned and humiliated. She was becoming someone stronger, wiser, and independent. Though the emotional scars of Sefu's betrayal remained, they no longer controlled her. Instead of being a victim of her past, she was now the author of her own story. And this time, she was writing a story of strength, success, and self-respect. Amari's life changed in ways she never imagined. The woman who was once broken and abandoned had now risen to great heights. Through years of hard work, she became one of the most respected corporate lawyers in Luthando. Clients sought her expertise, colleagues admired her dedication, and her name carried weight in the legal world. She had proven not only to herself, but to everyone who had doubted her that she was capable of success on her own. With her growing career came financial independence. She no longer lived in the shadows of her past. Instead of struggling to survive, she thrived. She bought a beautiful home in one of the finest neighborhoods, a place she could truly call her own. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome. But Amari's journey was not just about personal success. She wanted to give hope to other women who had faced betrayal and heartbreak. When she was invited to speak at women empowerment conferences, she shared her story openly, encouraging others to find strength within themselves. Many looked up to her as a role model, a living example that no matter how painful the past, a brighter future was always possible. Each time she stood on stage, speaking to rooms filled with women who had once felt hopeless, she realized that her pain had led her to a greater purpose. She was no longer just a woman who had been betrayed. She was a woman who had risen, stronger and more powerful than ever before. Sefu had once lived a life of luxury, but things were starting to change. His business, which had once been a symbol of success, was now struggling. He had made poor investments, trusting the wrong people, and the money he once spent so freely was disappearing fast. At first, he refused to believe it. He told himself it was just a rough patch, that things would get better soon. But as the months passed, the losses grew bigger and his financial troubles became impossible to ignore. Zaria, who had once clung to him with admiration and affection, began to change. She was no longer as patient or loving. She grew frustrated when Sifu could no longer take her on extravagant vacations or buy her the latest designer bags. She had fallen for the man with power and wealth, not a man struggling to keep his business afloat. The warmth in her eyes faded, replaced by cold disappointment. Seifu tried to reassure her, promising that things would turn around, but Zaria had no interest in waiting. Without his knowledge, she started spending time with another man, one even richer than Seifu had ever been. She smiled at Seifu during the day, but at night, she was in the arms of someone else, already planning her next move. Seifu, blinded by his own problems, had no idea that the woman he had left everything for was slowly slipping away. His world was beginning to crumble, and the worst was yet to come. One evening, Seifu arrived at the penthouse he had bought for Zaria, exhausted from a long day of trying to fix his failing business. He hoped to find comfort in her arms, some reassurance that everything would be okay. But as soon as he stepped inside, he sensed something was wrong. The lights were dim, and laughter echoed from the bedroom. His heart pounded as he walked toward the sound, his mind refusing to believe what his gut already knew. When he pushed the door open, the sight before him shattered his world. Zaria was wrapped around another man, laughing as if Seifu had never existed. She didn't even look surprised to see him. Instead, she sighed, annoyed by the interruption. The man beside her smirked, unbothered, as if Seifu was nothing more than a stranger. Seifu felt his chest tighten. "Zaria, what is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Zaria rolled her eyes and sat up. "Oh, Seifu, don't act so shocked," she said, her voice dripping with boredom. "Did you really think I loved you? It was always about the money. And now that you're broke, what do I need you for?" Her words hit him like a dagger to the heart. He had left his wife, destroyed his marriage, and abandoned the woman who truly loved him for this, for someone who never cared about him at all. His hands trembled as he looked at the woman he had once adored, now a stranger with a heart colder than ice. "Get out, Seifu," Zaria said, her voice sharp and final. "You're embarrassing yourself." Humiliated and broken, Seifu turned and walked away. Each step felt heavier than the last. He had given up everything for a woman who had never even wanted him. Now, he was left with nothing. No money, no love, no home, only the painful truth of his mistake. Seifu's downfall was swift and brutal. His once thriving business crumbled under the weight of bad decisions and risky investments. One by one, his business partners pulled out, and creditors came knocking. With no steady income, he struggled to keep up with his luxurious lifestyle. The penthouse was the first to go, followed by his expensive cars. Soon, even the house he had once shared with Amari was repossessed, leaving him with nowhere to turn. The same friends who once surrounded him at lavish parties now acted as if they had never known him. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. Whenever he tried to reach out for help, he was met with polite excuses or outright silence. The people who had once praised and admired him now whispered about his misfortune behind his back. With no money and no one to lean on, Seifu found himself in a position he had never imagined, struggling to afford even the basic necessities. His tailored suits became worn and wrinkled, his confident stride replaced by a weary shuffle. He wandered the streets of Luthando, the very city where he had once been a powerful businessman, now just another forgotten man. With nowhere else to turn, Seifu swallowed his pride and did something he never thought he would. He reached out to Amari. At first, he hesitated, staring at her number on his phone, his hands trembling. Would she even answer? Would she laugh at his misery? But he had no other choice. His once powerful connections had abandoned him, and the only person who had ever truly cared for him was the woman he had betrayed. When Amari saw his name on her screen, she hesitated. It had been years since she last heard his voice. Memories of heartbreak and betrayal flooded her mind, but curiosity got the better of her. She answered, her tone calm but distant. Seifu's voice cracked as he spoke, a shadow of the man he used to be. He asked to meet her, his voice filled with regret. After a moment of silence, she agreed, not because she wanted him back, but because she wanted to see for herself how life had changed him. When they met, Seifu looked nothing like the man who had once walked away from her so confidently. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by simple, worn-out clothes. His once proud face was tired, his eyes filled with sorrow. He broke down in tears, confessing how blind he had been, how greed, lust and arrogance had destroyed his life. He admitted that he had been wrong, that he had thrown away something priceless for something that was never real. He begged for forgiveness, but deep down, he knew he could never undo the pain he had caused. Amari sat across from Seifu, watching as he wiped away his tears. A part of her felt pity for the man who had once been her husband, but she knew she could never forget the pain he had caused her. She had spent years rebuilding herself from the ashes of betrayal, and now she was stronger than ever. She took a deep breath and spoke calmly, but firmly. Seifu, I have forgiven you for my own peace, but I have moved on. I built a new life without you, and I am happier than I have ever been. Her words were not meant to be cruel. They were simply the truth. She told him that his downfall had been his own doing, the result of the choices he had made. Seifu lowered his head, ashamed. He had once thought Amari was weak, that she would never survive without him. But now, she was the one sitting before him with grace and confidence, while he had nothing left. He realized, too late, that he had lost the only woman who had ever truly loved him. As Amari stood to leave, Seifu watched her walk away, knowing that this time she was the one who had the final say. Amari had finally found peace. She was no longer the woman who cried herself to sleep over a man who didn't value her. Instead, she had blossomed into a confident, successful woman who knew her worth. Life had given her a second chance at love, and this time, she chose wisely. She was now dating a kind and successful man who treated her with respect and care. Unlike Seifu, he appreciated her strength and intelligence, supporting her dreams instead of tearing her down. She no longer carried bitterness in her heart. The pain of the past had shaped her, but it did not define her. Instead of dwelling on betrayal, she used her experiences to inspire and uplift others. Amari became deeply involved in mentoring women who had been through similar heartbreaks, encouraging them to find their own strength. She spoke at women's empowerment events, sharing her journey and proving that life did not end with betrayal. It could be the start of something even greater. As she stood on stage one evening, looking at the crowd of women who had come to hear her speak, Amari smiled. She had turned her pain into power, and in doing so, she had found a happiness far greater than she had ever imagined. Seifu's life had become a shadow of what it once was. The man who had once lived in luxury, surrounded by wealth and admiration, now struggled to survive in a small, rundown apartment. The expensive suits, the fancy cars, and the lavish lifestyle were all gone. His phone, once ringing non-stop with business deals and invitations to elite events, now remained silent. The same friends who once praised him had long disappeared, leaving him alone with nothing but his regrets. Each day felt like a slow punishment for the choices he had made. He often found himself scrolling through social media, seeing pictures of Amari, thriving, successful, and truly happy. She had moved on, found love again, and was now a respected figure, empowering other women. He knew deep in his heart that he had lost the best thing that had ever happened to him, all because of his selfishness. Sometimes he would pass by events where Amari was speaking, standing far enough that she wouldn't notice him. He watched her with a mix of admiration and sorrow, knowing he could never undo the past. The powerful businessman who once had everything was now just a forgotten man, a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and betrayal destroy a good life. Amari's story serves as a powerful reminder that no amount of wealth or temporary pleasure can replace true love, loyalty, and integrity. Seifu had chased after luxury and excitement, believing that he could discard the woman who had stood by him through his struggles. But in the end, he lost everything: his wealth, his reputation, and the one person who truly loved him. His downfall was a lesson in karma, showing that betrayal always comes with consequences. On the other hand, Amari's journey is one of strength and resilience. She refused to let heartbreak define her, and instead rebuilt her life with courage and determination. She became a symbol of hope for other women who had faced similar betrayals, proving that true success is not about material wealth, but about self-respect and personal growth. The story ends with a simple but powerful message. Greed and betrayal may bring temporary pleasure, but true happiness comes from loyalty and integrity. While Seifu spends his days drowning in regret, Amari moves forward, stronger than ever, embracing a future filled with love, success, and purpose.